India is at the cusp of a digital revolution powered by increasing broadband and internet penetration, exponential data uptake, the government's focus on digitization, and increasing trend of technology adoption across industries. This revolution is likely to generate new growth avenues, boost industrial productivity, and has the potential to transform the socio-economic fabric of the country. Up next, we'll hear from Julian Gorman, Head of Asia Pacific GSMA, on critical regulatory reforms to realize India's digital potential. Welcome, Mr. Gorman.
To distinguished guests and speakers, and all of you joining today for the Economic Times Digital Telco Summit 2021, welcome from the GSMA. It is my pleasure and honour to be here on behalf of the GSMA today to share my views on the critical regulatory reforms to realise digital India's potential. I'd like to thank the Economic Times for hosting this event and for the invitation and providing me with an opportunity to express my thoughts on this very important topic, especially against the backdrop of significant reforms announced in September, which I believe have provided a new starting point for this discussion after a number of years of escalating concerns that history was maybe set to handicap India continuing on its digital India journey. But I will get back to that shortly. As the head of Asia Pacific for GSMA, I'm constantly discussing with mobile operators, governments, and participants in the digital ecosystem around the region about the observations of India and on its digital journey. When describing a foreign market to a person, it's often easiest to just discuss basic market KPIs like numbers of subscribers, penetration, mobile broadband, and the coverage and gender gap. But that does not do justice in describing India. And in that regard, it's also not easy to provide some simple suggestions for digital transformation acceleration. So with that in mind, my comments today arise from GSMA's commitment and support for India to achieve the Digital India vision. It was not just critical for the lives of every India consumer, but also for the region's digital ecosystem and prospects to be a regional technology powerhouse, guiding a path for other nations to aspire to. So for context, let's start with some global industry statistics to calibrate India's position globally. These data points on the screen are from GSMA's Global Mobile Economy Report released earlier in the year and available for anyone to download from our website. First, by 2025, GSMA expects around 5.7 billion unique subscribers to be using a mobile device, or about 70% of the world's population. To give you an idea, the WHO is hoping to have 70% of the world's population vaccinated against COVID-19 by the start of 2023. There has been no other health crisis known to man of the scale and economic impact of COVID-19, but it's pretty easy to speculate why mobile is going to be critical to the resilience of our society, economy, and managing global shocks like COVID-19 into the future, because it's the most pervasive technology and it's in just about everybody's pocket. Two more points I'd like to draw your attention to. The percentage of subscribers who use a smartphone is expected to rise to 81% by 2025. That's globally. Notice this is significantly higher than the number of mobile broadband users, and globally this forms a major part of what we call the usage gap. People who have coverage, have tools to access mobile broadband, but don't do so. In a past pandemic world where people need real-time access to health information to keep themselves and their families safe, and in addition to other proven reasons, it highlights an opportunity to immediately increase the resilience of our digital society and economies to reduce the gap between enabled and being a user. And this is an important principle to consider in India. Finally, I'll just mention that during the period to 2025, global operator revenues will only rise marginally, but during that time, they'll spend over 900 billion on their networks, with around 80% of that expected to be on 5G. Spend that caters for the accelerating appetite for mobile data, but also to deliver the 5G connectivity, which is going to transform industry and economic efficiency in ways that we have never seen before. So let's bring that down to a bit more of an India view. India is part of what we describe as a second wave of 5G launches. Pioneer developments are now passing 2.5 years old, with many of the large population nations of APAC and other regions now working towards their announced targets over the next 18 months for launch. What makes them stand out from the first wave, not including the advancements in network equipment or population size, the complexity and nature of their large geographies, generally lower ARPU, and critical factors for 5G success, such as relatively low fibre infrastructure, lower smartphone and user adoption, and much lower broadband penetration than the pioneer markets. All factors to be considered in how do you create a policy and regulatory framework to optimise a nation's 5G potential. But India does deserve acknowledgement for the rise up the ranks in the recent years, especially around key metrics, and they're continuing to show strong growth. By 2025, there still remains a significant usage gap, but the enablers of connectivity and smartphones are in place, and by its sheer population size, India is still going to draw disproportionate attention to investing in the digital ecosystem to make the foundations for 5G innovation grow. But India is a large and diverse country, and we must scratch below the national averages to seek out innovation and programs to reduce the digital divide and gender gap, to ensure that the digital economy we're building, the digital vision for India, embraces all and creates an inclusive journey, as the foundations of digital India must be built on the whole nation. And nowhere is that more important when we consider the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. Underserved and low levels of the population have been disproportionately affected by the economic downturn. India deserves respect for maintaining its 2025 vision for a $5 trillion economy, but we must make steps to reset the path for those most affected, of which many don't have access to mobile broadband or mobile at all. So just before I get to my critical recommendations, I'd like to highlight that the reforms announced in September to the industry's tax burden and potential spectrum costs for 5G and future growth. The rationalisation of AGR and the adjustments to penalties and interests have provided the industry with breathing space, and changes in provisions for foreign direct investment to make mysterious steps to avoiding what seemed to be a looming calamity for the industry. Unfortunately, as an industry and as an ecosystem creating the foundations for digital India, we cannot ignore the sustainability and the resilience of the whole industry is still not capable of supporting the digital India vision yet. Importantly, I need to acknowledge that India has taken some massive pioneer steps in creating assets like Aadhaar and universal payment APIs, which have leapfrogged other nations and do provide some very strong basic platforms to build robust digital societies. I encourage India to continue to add to these portfolio of enablers, and maintaining the principle of enabling innovation and digital ecosystem growth, rather than using it about controlling usage. And then with respect to the reforms in September, we need to continue to focus on those and make sure that we won't just push into the challenge a bit further down the road. We need to get those issues resolved. So finally, I get to my suggested critical reforms to being able to realise India's digital vision. I have 4, and I'll talk through each one. The 4 are spectrum policy. Second, adoption and application of policies to facilitate infrastructure deployment. Third, to focus on creating a safe and trustworthy online environment. And finally, and perhaps most to wrap them all together, is really the magic ingredient to helping all the above is the whole of government approach to policy for digital India delivery. So starting with spectrum, a key area for reforming spectrum policy. Despite India's large geography and population, operators have less spectrum than in most countries. Yet when taking into account the revenues in account, they've paid almost 9 times more per unit over the past 10 years than comparable countries. Therefore, in the short term, a key priority for the government is to release sufficient amounts of 5G spectrum in the next auction with modest reserve prices. The market is getting ready, with many Indian consumers already owning 5G devices and recent announcements of locally manufactured 5G devices. And so we need to make sure that they have something to work with, and an enabling spectrum framework that supports broad availability of 5G could accelerate the rollout and adoption of 5G in metro and rural areas. In the longer term, it is important that a full spectrum roadmap is detailed and available for all the operators. This will help operators better plan their investments, and investors more understand the complexities and the risks in the market. The GSMA recently published a report looking at mid-band spectrum needs up to 2030 for India. And that's basically how much spectrum is needed to deliver ITU IMT 2020 requirements, but basically a reliable 100 megabits per second end-to-end. You download user speeds and 50 megabits up. On average, we find that a total of 2 gigahertz of mid-band spectrum will be needed, and this figure remains relatively stable across a wide range of countries, as well as access to millimeter wave spectrum for some of those higher performance 5G use cases. These spectrum allocations will help improve network quality and allow consumers to access 5G, and also reduce the need for cell site densification, obviously a big cost in cell site densification. This will enable more efficient and environmentally sustainable network deployment, helping operators to reduce their carbon footprint and to meet emissions targets. Secondly, around facility infrastructure deployment policies. Although India has adopted policies to ease the deployment of network infrastructure, effective implementation is yet to be seen. Rights of way represent one of the main challenges in rolling out network infrastructure in many countries, and is one of the essential regulatory frameworks enabling ease of doing business. Furthermore, small cells are growing in importance and in the deployment of 4G and 5G. Small cells are viewed as a significant driver of the growth of 5G networks and digital revolution. So it's critical that we reduce the burden of rights of way. Flexibility to establish network sharing is also important on a voluntary and commercial basis between willing participants, because that may significantly save costs, enhance efficiency, and be helpful, especially in promoting connectivity in rural and remote areas. A third recommendation is around data privacy and maintaining trust in the internet. Data privacy regulations are crucial to boosting consumer confidence in digital services. Actually, lack of trust can be a barrier to the adoption of mobile broadband and something that stops people using it if they feel they've lost trust. At the same time, data flows, including personal data across borders, is fundamental to the growth of countries on both a regional and global level. India may be a very large economy and a very large geography, but to enjoy the scale benefits and innovations, especially things like 5G, requires data to flow across borders. A recent GSMA study shows that negative repercussions associated with data localization rules on economic growth and gains generated from IoT adoption come from restrictive data transport across borders. Frameworks that facilitate a good balance between national consumer privacy and cross-border data flows are essential to mitigate the negative impact of economic growth. As mobile connectivity has become even more embedded in our daily lives, there's also a corresponding need to ensure people continue to use these increasingly essential services safely and securely. Given that risks are dynamic and not confined to national borders, sustained and international multi-innovations stakeholder cooperation is key in all areas, and we need these to manage the risk. As new innovations come online, the entire value chain must adopt robust security measures. Globally recognized and industry-led, the NISIS specifications around provide voluntary consensus security standards are best suited to manage risk while allowing new innovations to thrive. A report published this year by the GSMA explained how online misinformation and disinformation also has the potential to undermine trust in the online environment, with the lack of trust limiting the adoption and continued use of digital technology. Continued dialogue and collaborative efforts will be essential to provide the trust necessary for India to release its digital potential and to really make people engage and feel comfortable and safe online. And that's a big part about driving inclusive and extending exclusive down to the full population. My final principle and recommendation, critical recommendation, is around a holistic whole of government approach that is necessary for the potential to speed up digitalization and adoption of new technologies in India and in a more efficient manner. A whole of government approach could be more efficiently harness the capabilities of intelligent mobile connectivity by removing barriers caused by siloed efforts and different ministries. As digitalization continues to cross and combine sectors, whole of government approach is crucial to ensuring the realization of benefits that mobile connectivity and especially 5G can offer. To break it down even more simply, whole of government approach is around making sure that we're working together to build a digital economy together and not in silos. So finally, I leave you with what is, how critical is critical? My title started off with critical recommendations. Studies have shown that a 10% rise in mobile broadband penetration can lift GDP up 1 to 2%. So that's economically critical, especially for a country recovering from an 8% slowdown from the virus. Mobile is a lifeline for people to not only communicate with family and friends, but for access to health information, education, knowledge of the world around us, and to mitigate the risks of misinformation and disinformation. So for a person in their home life, you can say mobile is critical. And finally, mobile is a democratization of participation in the digital economy. It's the tool and the foundation for increasing resilience of our economies and our society, and the platform for building the future of our planet and responding to climate change, pandemics, and social conflict. It is not just my 4 recommendations that are critical, of course, but they are critical for India to assert its role as a regional and global leader and transform its natural assets of an aspiring and entrepreneurial population into being a global digital powerhouse. And so with those, I leave you with my 4 recommendations. And thank you again to Economic Times for providing the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman, for an insightful and precise session. Now it's time to move to the next discussion. Stay tuned, everyone.